We got Nerdy Blurb TV, my brother in the chat. What is going on, man? Thank you for showing up on this wonderful quarantine evening.
Quarantine, and I got my Corona COVID 12 pack right here. It's all good. It's all good.
I feel like you're the only one spreading Corona positivity. They should sponsor you.
This thing it's airborne, and so many people are. I mean, look, let's face it. It doesn't matter what I say. It's going to happen whether I have anything to say about it or not. All I can do is isolate myself as best I can, keep my family safe, and avoid my friends, except on YouTube live streams, right? Woohoo!
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's kind of like the one cool thing about all this is that, like, I assume more people are just going to be like on their computers day in and day out. So I'm hoping we can like get more people into these live chats. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that could be something like kind of positive for like the small YouTuber community. Is hopefully we'll get more people in watching our stuff. So
well, it's kind of funny because people like us that maybe do too much stuff online. Sometimes we're told to get a life, get away from the online community. Now people are going to be isolated physically. They're the ones that should get a life, and we're going to be telling them while on live streams, why don't they get a life? And they're going to have to learn to make friends online.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought I'd be going to New York Comic Con with somebody I met online and making plans to do more stuff like that. So it's weird, it's so weird how naturally that can happen. And we brought this up before, like when we were doing like these weekly shows, I was like, dude, I talk to you more than I talk to most of my friends in person. So there's something to be said about that.
Yeah. Well, you're just lucky.
I'll
You're
give
the envy of millions of people. I mean, I'm loved by thousands, hated by millions. Yeah, but most of and loved by viruses too, apparently. But it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, very, very true.
So,
all right, well, we got some folks in the chat, so I think that we can hop right on into this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 32nd episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comic book community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or adaptations, we hit it all. This week, I am joined by the other half of the comic book YouTube dynamic duo, the Canadian Cape Crusader, my friend, ComicBoom.
How's it going, Dark Knight?
It is going, man. I am locked up here in my office with ample coffee and whiskey and plenty of comic books, man. If you see, because I was in New York last week for the interview, I didn't get to pick up last week's books, and I just have a stack between last week and this week. Nice and hefty. So lots of reading to do, which is not bad at all.
Yeah. Well, we're fortunate. You and I were fortunate. We do have access that not everybody has to digital copies and some free preview copies. But hopefully we can give some people, steer them in the right direction while they're awaiting the apocalypse. At least do it with a comic book in your hand, surrounded by loved ones and Corona. Corona.
I like that.
12.
I like that narrative. Dying with a comic book in your hand, surrounded by loved ones.
That's right. There are worse fates, my friend. There are worse fates.
Yeah, that is true. You could die without comic books in your hand. Now,
don't even say that.
That would cardinal sin, man. Cardinal sin. God, if we're just gonna make this happen. If I happen to die by some accident and you're at the funeral, if I have an open casket and there's not like Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen like in my hands as I'm laying there like this, I fully expect you to tamper with it and put one in my hands.
I'll tell you what, I'll make sure you're buried with the link to the online digital copy. I won't actually give you the comic book because I'm not going to bury you with a comic.
Am I not worth the price of a graphic novel?
Sure you are. It's sort of like if leaving you money, I could just write you a check and put it on your body. It's
well, whatever suits your fancy, my friend. Oh, Jesus. What a time to be alive, huh? I guess we'll change this to quarantine yellow.
Yes, that's good. Sort of reminding me of yellow fever. That's awesome. That's right.
Appropriate. We're all here for the positivity, folks. Well, I think today's conversation is going to be something totally different from anything we've really ever done. This is not only to kind of benefit ourselves selfishly, because I think Boom is going to have a lot of great recommendations, but we figured that with everybody having all of this extra time at home, that giving some quarantine reading recommendations might not be a bad idea. And I certainly plan on taking advantage of it and spending some time rereading some stuff that I haven't touched in a long time, checking out some things that I've always been meaning to check out, and obviously catching up on current books. Now, before we go underway, I do want to ask you guys, please make sure to support both channels. You can subscribe to me down below, and there's also a link in the description for ComicBoom's channel. You should definitely go subscribe to him. He is on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and he deserves to get there as soon as humanly possible. So if for some reason you're not subscribed to that guy, you should be.
Yeah, before the world ends. Yes. Before the last day of Earth, I'll be able to, when I get up to the pearly gates, I'll say I'm in the 1,000 club. That would be wonderful. Yes.
Folks, give it to him. It is his dying wish. If I can do anything for my friend here, let's make it happen. And of course, we are steadily approaching a meager 250 subs. So let's get there. And of course, if you guys like this video and enjoy some of the recommendations that we're going to be giving, leave a like down below so that we know to do more stuff like this to kind of secure down the paranoia surrounding the quarantine and make everybody's lives a little bit more pleasurable. We'd have a couple chats a couple comments here in the chat. Eat That Horse says he'd highly recommend the 2009 Batgirl series, only 24 issues before it got canceled because of the new 52, but a fantastic little book. Yeah, that's Gail Simone's run, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The first 24 issues are Gail Simone, and that's where I like that. That's when it introduced her to her younger brother, who is the little psychopath that we saw in the Batman Who Laughs series, 7-issue series was the last time we saw him. But yes, very good, very good. Right, yeah. That was right before. Unfortunately, issue 25, I think it converted into the Burnside Batgirl series, which some people don't mind. It wasn't my cup of tea, but
although I'm starting to think that might not be it, because now that I'm thinking about it, Eat That Horse said it was from 2009, which is pre-New 52.
Oh, so, that is 2011, the New 52.
So I'm starting to think that maybe it was something to do with Cassandra Cain. I don't know. Eat That Horse, please feel free to give us information on the creative team down in the chat, and everybody feel free to take Eat That Horse's lead. Give us some recommendations as we're going through, because I don't mind having a little bit of extra reading material. We also have Maverick MX just giving some greetings in the chat. Thanks for joining us, man. Glad to see you here. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, so without further ado, I think it's time to get into the main topic and give us some comics and quarantine recommended reading. And I'm curious, before we go into this, Boom, what was kind of your standard for picking various stories or runs, or what was your approach to deciding what to recommend for our quarantine comics reading?
Right. The standards that I set for myself is, number one, I didn't want to depress the hell out of people. Look, if we're going to be dying in the apocalypse, I want to at least die with a mild little smile on my face, or at least reading something that ends with a good message. So I tried to avoid too much depression. And I also wanted a story that was self-contained. I wanted something, if I was going to recommend a trade or something, that it at least has self-contained stories, or you get some level of satisfaction, even if it is a series of various stories, that it has endings, an actual stories with beginning, middle, and ends, and something that you can sit back and read, and that you got to take your time and relax. So sit back with a Corona, sit back, and even if it takes you an hour or 2 hours to read through it, you're going to be generally satisfied at the end of it. What about you?
For me, I try to recommend, generally, there are a couple that break this and are exceptions to this rule, but I try to pick kind of lengthy runs that you can really sink your teeth into, because I feel like a lot of the time, a lot of us really want to sit down in a very kind of condensed period of time, which we don't always have because life gets in the way, and just chug through something and enjoy it in its entirety, and I think that this whole quarantine thing, with a lot of people unfortunately being out of work, and away from school, it gives them the opportunity to really sit down and experience something almost in its entirety in a very small period of time. So that was kind of my approach. It's just kind of like those things that you're always like, oh, I've been meaning to get to that when I have a bunch of time. Well, we got it. So that
Yeah.
was kind of my big push. So boom, I'm curious, what's your first recommended reading for comics in quarantine?
I got to be honest. I never actually ranked them because I don't.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah, I didn't find it appropriate to rank these because, quite frankly, I'm just going to pick one at random here, and I'm going to go with Ed Brubaker's Criminal.
Great recommendation.
Because I got the first hardcover here. I also get this as a weekly or as a monthly series that comes out. I believe it's still coming out. I try to get the hardcovers. I just got one here. This is fantastic. Self-contained stories, but it's usually they are part of a larger narrative, and it ranges anywhere. If he can have 1 or 2 issue stories up to 12 issue stories. He's Ed Brubaker. I mean, he's just the go-to guy for this sort of materials. It's definitely something that it's well worth it. It's crime noir. This is the guy, Ed Brubaker. He's the master that wrote Captain America, which is another recommendation. If you want to read a long run, read his long Captain America run. That was amazing. I mean, anything by Ed Brubaker, man, you can't go wrong. He's actually on my list a couple of times. He's also. I'm gonna show 2 right off the bat because I got a lot here. We got lots to discuss. Criminal, and there's another one here. If you're a Catwoman fan, it's called Selena's Big Score. This is another one that people will probably see in on the back issue bins. You can buy this in just a trade. Selena's Big Score. Actually, I apologize. It's story and art by Darwin Cook, but it reminds me so much of Ed Brubaker. I guess I cheated there. I said 2. This is Darwin Cook, but anyways, man, you can't go wrong with crime noir because usually at the end, usually the good guys usually win, and there's always some sex, blood, and violence, and it's a good way to vent out during the apocalypse because we don't want to go out and create civic chaos. If we have to stay inside, if we have pent-up emotion, better to express ourselves through the angst of reading a comic book than taking it out on somebody else physically or a family member for that matter.
Yeah, that's a great pick. It was actually also one of my picks. I was gonna say just go through Brubaker's crime sagas that including Criminal, Kill or Be Killed, which up the single issues of Kill or Be Killed over the summer. Both, I believe, with Sean Phillips as well, who is an absolutely incredible artist. I can't really, I can't really compliment or properly provide the information like you did regarding Ed Brubaker's aptitude for storytelling and especially crime noir. It's absolutely spectacular. There's a reason why I think every kind of podcast we've ever had where we're putting a Batman writer on anything, I'm always like, let's give Brubaker another shot. Because I think that since leaving the big 2, especially, he's really developed that crime noir sensibility more than ever, which is why it's a practical wet dream to have him back on a Batman title, which we'll never get, but it's a wet dream for a reason, I suppose. And I love how you came swinging out of the gate with that because Nerdy Blurb TV's first real question was asking if we were going to recommend any indie titles because he loves his indies, and we just came out of the gate swinging. So
I got more than a few indie titles for sure. Yeah, the majority actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you count Vertigo as indie, but I have a couple Vertigo titles which are indie-esque storytelling. So, yeah, awesome recommendation.
So what's your first one?
I guess I'll go superheroes. So obviously over the last couple weeks, I was really deep diving into a lot of good Marvel stuff to prepare for my interview that was last week. And it's funny because this run of comics I'm about to mention, when I was rereading it, I thought to myself, I was like, man, this is a little bit disappointing because it's kind of aged. But after I read it, I actually went back, read it, most of the preceding runs leading up to it, and I realized, this was so revolutionary for its time and the amount of complexity that it added to the storytelling and the characters. And that would have to be Frank Miller's Daredevil.
Excellent.
Through and through, Born Again being the absolute culmination of it all. But I think especially if you compare, who the character was, under Stan Lee and Gene Colan, and then moving on into Miller, man, what he did for this character is absolutely astounding. You know, from the introduction of Elektra to the murder of Elektra into kind of the reconstitution of his origin in Man Without Fear, which I think is some of John Romita Jr.'s best art ever. And I don't often compliment John Romita Jr.'s art. And then obviously Born Again, which I think is potentially one of the best books to ever come out of Marvel. It is lengthy. It gives you plenty of time to really sit down and dig into it. And again, because they're very old fashioned, the reading can be done in a very manageable amount of time, except for maybe Born Again. I think Born Again is one of those things that you want to sink into like the visual complexity as well. But it's absolutely incredible. Daredevil is my favorite Marvel character. Frank Miller is one of the best to ever do it. So I think that this was an easy recommendation for me to make.
It was, and it also, because Matthew Murdock is what adds complexity to Born Again. And any story, you're going to find that once you read Born Again, you're going to be addicted to Daredevil if you're not already. That's just the reality. And he's a Christian. Daredevil, Matthew Murdock is an interesting character because he's one of the characters that plays a lot with his faith, that Christian faith. He's always in a confession booth confessing something to a priest because he always has this level of complexity to his life. And it doesn't, and even if it's, whether it's Frank Miller or even Brian Bendis or Mark Waid or Charles Soule, whenever they write Daredevil, I always find that writers seem to be often at their best when they write Daredevil. There's something about the character that inspires great stories. So quite frankly, I mean, Born Again would be absolutely my number one Daredevil story. Having said that, you can't go wrong with Daredevil. I mean, even Marvel Knights, Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti's on Marvel Knights with that run. That's fantastic. What is it? I think Guardian Devil,
first volume. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. So yeah, excellent choice. Excellent choice.
Yeah. And plus I know JT Gamer was asking specifically about a couple of Marvel books. Man, Frank Miller's Daredevil, great way to go. And again, Daredevil, my favorite Marvel character, so I can't recommend it enough. ComicBoom, my friend, my companion. What is your second pick?
I got to go with something called 100 Bullets.
You know, part of me loves that you have picked off two of the books that were on my list. Part of me hates it. I don't know where to.
I got to go for it. I can go with something else, but
no. Go for it. Talk about it, brother. Go for it.
I mean, I don't know. 100 Bullets. 100 Bullets is a comic book that, why this hasn't been made to a movie yet, I don't know. It's insane. This thing would make such a fantastic movie. The idea that we have this guy named Agent Graves who walks, this mysterious guy, he walks up, he's got a gun with 100 rounds of ammunition, and he says to anybody, look, this gun's untraceable, the bullets are untraceable, whoever you kill with this gun, you're going to get away with it. Have some fun, do whatever you want to do. And the individual stories that are told with what people choose to do with this gun and who they choose to kill and whether or not they go through with it, and their own individual stories are interesting. But what's even more interesting is the background. So you can read individual stories. The first 24 issues in particular are very, very good. And they're individual stories for the most part, but there's a larger narrative. And the larger narrative is, who is Agent Graves and who is this organization that has all this power? Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it so captivating. So you can, if you're not interested in the larger narrative, you can ignore it and just focus on good character-based stories that change from issue to issue for the most parts. You know, again, some storylines are a little longer than others, but Brian Azzarello, Eduardo Rizzo, man, they really put this character on the map. And again, if Warner Brothers is looking to make a movie, how on God's green earth do you avoid 100 Bullets?
Wow. So I'm actually going to agree with some Okie dude here in the chat. I think it would be much better in an episodic format. And I think just given the fact that it has such a long, vast and sprawling story, I think that it would really serve for a multiple season episodic style storytelling. What's really funny is I took a film class last semester, and I wrote a spec script for a pilot of the first issue of 100 Bullets and submitted it to a professor. And he was like, man, this could really work, you know, because we had to pitch the idea and everything. And it just caters so well to like an HBO or Netflix style premium storytelling.
Agreed.
Like you were saying, it is so complex because not only can you really sit there and enjoy the really digestible single stories, but it all networks and sprawls out into something huge. And that underlying history of Agent Graves and his organization, it would serve really well to be able to wrap all of these bite-sized stories together into this one big narrative. Not to mention, it's just thematically absolutely like spectacular and interesting, because really, what does it give these people? You know, like the untraceable bullets and the untraceable gun. It gives you the power to play God in isolated incidences. Like, what happens when you give people, under all of these different contexts, the ability to play God and to seek revenge or justice by whatever terms that they feel meet justice? It is so interesting. Visually, I think specifically one of the things that I love too in Eduardo Rizzo's art are those moments where he'll black out an entire panel except for maybe the eyes and the mouth of a character, just when they're about to do something potentially more sinister with the gun. I think it is such a great visual storytelling cue that could be brought into television as well. Absolutely great pick. You know, I think we're on the same thought process so far, but yeah, 100 bullets, man. I think not only would be a great thing just to sit down and run through during our time of comics and quarantine, but also, yeah, it'd be an amazing television show to be adapted.
Yeah. And then just a quick aside, another Brian Azzarello 24 issue run. It was only 24 issues long. It's a Western called Loveless. And that is I didn't put it on the list because it's depressing and it ends depressing. But if you want to be really depressed, read Loveless by Brian Azzarello.
Listen, I unapologetically love Brian Azzarello. I know there's a lot of flack for him out there. I think he's a great writer. So yeah, I'll have to give it a shot. I got plenty of time on my hands.
So you gotta. What's the next on your list? See if you can snag one of mine.
One thing I did want to pull through some of these comments in the chat here real quick. Taylor Pector says he would recommend Lazarus by Greg Rucka and Michael Lark. It's his favorite book.
Lazarus is on my list. So, but yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah,
there you go. And then he said if he were to get into his big two work, he would say Wonder Woman and Checkmate. I've read bits of his Wonder Woman, have not read his Checkmate though. So I'll be relying on you to let me know a little bit more about it in the chat, because I really like that kind of noir espionage sensibility, and that's what I feel we might be getting from something like Checkmate. So,
a quick note on Checkmate that Greg Rucka has lunch with Matt Fraction and Brian Bendis every Tuesday, I believe, from what they tweeted, or from what Brian Bendis tweeted, and Greg Rucka's past work on Checkmate, I think he's hopefully influencing Brian Bendis so that his Leviathan Checkmate is maybe going to see some improvements. That's my hope, because I agree with Taylor Rector there or Taylor Pector that his Checkmate was very good.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's something I'll definitely have to give it a shot. Before I get into that, I picked up the first couple volumes of Gotham Central. I've only read the first volume prior, so that's a good recommendation right there.
Absolutely, it is.
Has a decent body of work. We're on the topic of Ruckas and Brewbakers. Very crime oriented. It's Gotham City. I mean, it's a Gotham City crime drama with very minimal Batman, which, I love me my Batman. My entire channel is kind of based off of the character, but I think it's super interesting to kind of explore the gutters of Gotham, where Batman doesn't necessarily get to interact as much.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
I do want to address one more thing in the chat. I know JT Gamer says if he were to do Daredevil, he would go Stan Lee first. You're more than welcome to. It'll probably make you appreciate Frank Miller that much more because it's complex. But I think that you can jump right into Frank Miller's. If you wanted to go Man Without Fear first, even though in terms of chronology, it's a little bit later, it's his modern retelling of Daredevil's origin, and then get into the rest of his run and read the rest of it chronologically. I think that would serve you just as well. Just to save you a little bit of time, but that's my personal opinion. Okay, so let me reach over to the bookshelf here. And let's see. I'm like really hoping I don't collapse my entire shelf here because this is a big guy.
Oh, of course.
Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason's Batman and Robin run is easily one of the best books, not just Bat books, to come out of the New 52. One of the best books to come out of the New 52, and I think it is one of the most underrated titles I think I have ever read. This is the book that made me absolutely love Tomasi. And aside from that, it made me love Gleason. And it does something that I don't think many other writers were able to do, and that's humanize Damian and make Damian a character that we can truly care about. And I liked seeing him in the context with Bruce, because although I absolutely adore Grant Morrison's Batman and Robin run where it's Dick and Damian, I think it was about time that we got to see a little bit more of Bruce getting to be the one to teach his son and getting to be that mentor figure for his son, and seeing how they collide. This run really does such a good job exploring their relationship, and I think on every level it spans so many different genres, which is great, which I think ultimately articulates the versatility of Batman, because all of them work from the beginning where we're exploring the two of them together. And then you get about 20% of the way through the run and Damian dies and you have that one silent issue. Oh my God. Like I almost cried. And then, we explore the depths that Batman is willing to go to get his son back. And then when he finally does get his son back, it is such powerful storytelling. And what I love is, Boom, we talk constantly on podcasts. There we go, the Hellbat suit.
That's right.
And we talk constantly on these podcasts about, writers and creators getting to do these really long spanning runs. And one of the things that works so well about this entire run is there is an overarching theme and there is an overarching kind of general plot thread throughout, but all of the stories are very digestible.
Yeah. And
you can read each one of them and feel satisfied. Not to mention, I think this is the book where Patrick Gleason really developed as an artist. And I can't say enough positive things about it.
I agree. And, one of the wonderfully heartfelt things about the Tomasi and Gleason Batman and Robin run is that I think it humanized Batman more for the first time since Frank Miller hardened up the dark Batman in the 80s with Dark Knight Returns. Patrick Gleason and Peter Tomasi were the first writers on Batman since Miller, in my view, that made me feel that Batman was more humanized. And it was because Damian, I credit obviously Grant Morrison for making me like Damian. I credit Gleason and Tomasi for making me love him. And it's that family dynamic, and Patrick Gleason with his art, with those big expressive eyes that he drew, and the art, it really drew you in. And this Hellbat suit, when Batman is going to battle Darkseid at Apocalypse to resurrect his son, and nothing would stop him, not even the entire Justice League. I mean, For once, as insanely obsessive as Batman is, I felt that,
Yeah.
I mean, when your father, us older readers, man, when you could feel that, man, we'd go to hell for our kids. And that's what Batman did. And straight up, man, that's exactly that. It was a great choice.
It's so good. I mean, like if you want to talk an almost perfect run of comic books and the way he's able to evolve all of the main cast of characters.
Yeah,
it is so good. And you brought up something very particular about the art that I think has been a mainstay in this person's art ever since. And that's the way Gleason draws these really expressive eyes. And I think this is one of the books that really kind of pushes the fact that, like, yes, Damian can murk every single one of us within a second. Yes, Damian is brutal. Yes, Damian's a narcissist and a little asshole, but he's a kid. He's a child. And you have to remember that. And, just watching him grow throughout and the interaction between him and Bruce, I think just opens up not only obviously Damian to readers, but it opens up Batman emotionally in a way that, like you had expressed earlier, that we just don't get to see. Because I think a lot of writers forget that, yes, Batman does put up that emotional block, but behind it, there is just a pool of emotions ready to rush out. It's not like they're not there. It's not like he shuts them down. He's keeping them behind a dam, and that dam cracks. and sometimes he needs to let those things out. And yeah, I mean, it's a nearly perfect run in comic books, and I would put my money on it, whatever little bit I have. So, yeah, Comic Boom. What is your next pick, my man?
Well, I'm going to go off the beaten path here, and I am going to go with Donny Cates' God Country.
Hey, nice one.
Now, Donny Cates' God Country is it's such a great story. It's going to be a movie from what I understand. And the reason why God Country is such a great story is that it's about basically an old man. He lives basically on an old farm. He lives in a dilapidated house. He's got a son, and his son is married and has a child, but his wife died earlier, and he's slowly getting Alzheimer's, and it's apparent that he's in the end point of Alzheimer's, and he keeps forgetting, and he keeps getting in trouble with the local sheriff, and he comes across this sword, and this sword is almost like Thor's hammer. He picks up the sword, and he's granted basically superpowers, and he's also granted his memory back. And you know what? It's such I could get emotional talking about it. It's really, it has an impact for me, this story. It's such a beautiful story. At the end of let's put it this way. I'll never forget the words at the end of the story. I forget them a little bit. I'm going to paraphrase, but Donny Cates ends the story by saying that, and you thought this story was about an old man and a sword. And it really isn't about an old man and a sword. It's about something different. And of course, it's related to family, and you have to read it. It's such a beautiful tale. And I got to tell you, in times of an apocalypse, and think of this, if you're losing your mind, like with Alzheimer's, that's a personal kind of apocalypse, because everything you're losing touch with who you are. And so how you address that in the face of potential extraordinary power, while in the face of love and family and faith, Donny Cates does a masterful job of telling that story. And I want to give a shout out to the artist. I should mention the artist is Jeff Shaw is on the art, and Jason Wordy is the colorist, and John Hale does the letter and design. It's very, very good. You can pick it up cheap in trade. I think it's $17 US. Probably this thing's on sale in most comic shops anyway. This is if I was ranking it, this would be in my top 5 easily.
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome pick. It is the book that turned me on to Donny Cates.
Incredible.
It is a great way to support, small indie titles. Like I really can't elaborate any better on you did about its thematic resonance in the story. It's super inventive, a very original idea. And, if you want to read Donny Cates without kind of anything reeling him in, it's an absolutely great way to start. God Country, I'd pull it out, but it is like crammed into my bookshelf towards the bottom. But yeah, it's one that I didn't think to recommend, but I think that it's such a great pull, man. I can't.
Yeah, I would tell Nerdy Blurb TV to definitely check out God Country. It is, you will not be disappointed. There's a reason why. I know a lot of comic books are getting their own movies now, and screenplays are being bought up, et cetera, and they're being optioned. But God Country, it's not just hype. There's a reason why God Country put Donny Cates on the map, and there's a reason why Marvel scooped them up after reading it, because it's very good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. So my next pick is probably my most recent. I'm going to say you go back, you read House of X, Powers of X, into Dawn of X. I think it's a great initiative to catch up on, but I think that there's enough to it by now, especially with all of these different books that are spawning out of it, that it gives you so much to read, a lot to sink your teeth into, and you can really immerse yourself into the X-Men and the mutants kind of realm, especially now that they've developed their own society and their own sovereign country. And the thing is, even though every book is not for me, I think that there's such a diversity in the types of titles, and even now as they continue to sprawl more out, that there's at least something for everybody. I mean, I even have, let me take this webcam here with me, this short box down yonder for the House of X, Powers of X.
Oh yeah, you got the box. Nice.
Dude, I'm a whore for short boxes, the graphic ones. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I think that it takes the X-Men into a brand new realm, and I think it challenges a lot of these characters in some ways that are similar, but in a lot of ways that are going to be brand new. And I know some people are a little bit adverse to it, but I think, one thing to keep in mind is that this is a totally different context for these characters in so many different ways. But I really love the idea of watching the mutants deal with the difficulty not only of kind of dispersing racism, essentially, but finding their own level of credence to be their own people and to do it, on their own terms. So, and not to mention, it gives you a great excuse to catch up on something that is very current in comic books, and it'll give you the opportunity to hop right in at the end of this quarantine and pick up these books.
I would add to your comments. I would not. It wasn't on my list. However, I will say this: I would recommend House of X and Powers of X if you're already an established comic book reader and you wanna own up on what the current status quo is of the X-Men. My only criticism of House of X and Powers of X, and it might be a minor one, is it establishes the new status quo. It doesn't really finish the story. I love the questions that I ask myself when I was done House of X and Powers of X. I had all these questions in my head. I loved it. I was absorbed in it. I read every page. I read it 2 or 3 times. I enjoyed it. But I had so many questions by the time I was done reading those 12 issues, 6 of House of X, 6 of Powers of X, that, of course, you got to continue reading into Dawn of X to get some of those answers. And there's, of course, it's still an ongoing series. So if let me put it to you this way, if the apocalypse is going to be next month, I wouldn't recommend Powers of X because it's the story's not going to end in a month.
Yeah.
but if I knew that it was another 2 years from now that the world was going to end, I would recommend reading Powers of X because it'll probably be more of an end story with Hickman and the rest of the Marvel crew finishing up the storylines.
Yeah, plus, I mean, you know that Hickman is going to be doing some big architectural things for the broader Marvel universe and not just for the X-Men. So if you want to kind of be privy to the direction of Marvel, I think this is a great thing to hop onto. And again, what is already there gives us plenty of reading material. I need to address this very important chat from my friend Nerdy Blurb. He said, "Hey, guess who walked in through my front door? Shug says hi, my man. Shug, I love you. I miss you. You should be on screen more often because I haven't seen you in a while. But I hope you're doing well. And yeah, if you guys haven't, on Nerdy Blurb TV, you can go back and watch these older videos. The Shug Show on Nerdy Blurb TV, one of the best bits of content on the interwebs. Absolutely adore it. So quick plug for my pal Ryan and for the Shug Show.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so ComicBoom, what do you got to follow that up with? What is your next recommendation?
I want to make a quick comment to Joe's Geek Show. Joe was saying that he says I'm stroking. He said I'm stroking to God Country, and I thought I don't know if I'd stroke to the trade paperback. That wasn't exactly how I felt when I read it, but hey, to each their own.
Yeah.
Hey,
Joey's a very sensual guy.
Yeah. He's stroking to it right now. Glorious. All the power to you. Normally I keep that in private. Good thing we didn't invite him on the live stream. Just bugging you, Joe.
Jeez. Oh, okay. So aside from stroking some glorious God Country, ComicBoom, what's your next rec, my friend?
I'm gonna recommend Grant Morrison's JLA Earth 2. And the reason why is because this is how, even though it's called Earth 2, this is actually Earth 3. So I know it's a little confusing, but it's in current continuity, Earth 3 is where the crime syndicate is. And this Grant Morrison's interpretation of the crime syndicate, it's just awesome. It's entertaining as hell. It deals with the way the Justice League was formatted in their makeup in the mid 1990s. But it's just a great read. It's self-contained. It's beautifully rendered. The art, of course, is Frank Quietly. Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly, they've had more than one collaboration together. And this is just one of many. I mean, Owlman, I think Joe, you'd like this, Joe's Geek Show. He'd love this, because if you want something to stroke to, Superwoman, believe me, this is what you want to. There's a scene here between Superwoman and Jimmy Olsen that you gotta see to believe. Let's just put it this way: she corners Jimmy Olsen in a closet in the Daily Planet, and the Daily Planet is a little different on Earth 3 than or in this case Earth 2 than it is. Anyways,
we're getting saucy.
Hey, look, there you go, there you go. Yeah, it looks like Owlman. But is that a Court of Owl, or is that Owlman?
No. It's remember, I picked this up at New York this year. I commissioned this from Jonathan Glapion. It's Owlman.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to go with it's hard to see because of the glare, but I got all those villain heads up there by him. So
yeah, that's right.
Got to start prepping the next one. But yeah,
amazing inks
discussion.
Yeah, but
no, I mean that's a great pick. It is an instant Justice League classic. You want to get a flavor for the DC universe that is also really fresh. Grant Morrison's obviously the guy to do it, and anything with the abbreviation JLA in the name Grant Morrison on it is going to be good. He wrote, arguably even the best run of JLA of all time. It's perhaps the most famous as well. But yeah, obviously, me having this should be some inclination of how much I like that story. So I think it's an absolutely great pick. It recontextualizes the Justice League, and it recontextualizes some old Silver Age style stories. You really can't go wrong, man. I didn't consider it at all, but that's an awesome pick.
Yeah, well, thank you. So so what's your next one?
So I do want to go into the chat briefly real quick. Taylor Pector brings up Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force run. I've heard so many good things about it, but I haven't read it yet because I think I'm an idiot. But I'll definitely have to dig into it. I feel like I've gotten this recommendation like multiple times on stream, and I need to just bite the bullet and go buy that.
I think that the last time somebody recommended a Remender run to me was Black Science. They just released the 3rd volume of Black Science. I've heard a lot of good things about Black Science, but if anybody in the chat's read Black Science, let me know if it's any good. I've heard really good things about it. But yeah, Remender, I think he even wrote another one called there's another indie one. Is it Infinite something 7? Anyways, I don't want to leave the chat here because we don't want two guys leaving the chat. But in any event, Rick Remender is definitely one of those guys. He's got an extensive history. He's got a great indie history. He's written so much at Marvel. I think he's done some DC, but mostly Marvel, and his indie stories. The guy is really, really good. I really should be probably reading more of his stuff. Yeah. I think he writes Low, an indie series called Low. Which I'm behind on my reading on it. It's not bad, but in any event,
yeah, absolutely. It's weird because I think Rick Remender was a big Marvel presence, like right when and was kind of starting to delve more into indie as I was getting into comics. So he's like a name that I've just heard so much about. So Taylor, I appreciate the rec, and if anybody in the chat has any more Rick Remender recommendations, I'm glad to give them shots. I guess I can segue into my next pick. Taylor, I saved your comment because I didn't want to show it because it is, in fact, one of my picks. And you bring up Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, which I can absolutely recommend as something to steal away all of your quarantine time because there is so much to it. I recommend pretty much every tie-in, including, the supplementary Green Lantern Corps to read along with it. It is a huge, sprawling epic that redefines the Green Lantern mythos. It is absolutely fantastic. You want something to really get a flavor for a character through and through, you read this series, and even the rest of the Corps, not even just Hal Jordan, because there's a lot of exposure here. It redefines and retcons. Little nod back to our last stream if you guys didn't catch that. We were talking about reboots and retcons. But it retcons so much of like the goofiness of old school storytelling and makes it so plausible and I can't even find the proper way to compliment it, but you know, there are like, I believe 3 of these thick, like with 2 C's, maybe even 3 C's omnibuy out
Yeah.
there, and more supplementary material. I was actually the other day just bagging and boarding all of my Blackest Night stuff, including
Yeah.
all the tie-ins. But yeah, man, it redefines this space of the DC universe, there's so much to it that if you have all of the spare time, this is something that you just want to sit down and pig out on, man.
It's yeah. What can I say? It's Jeff Johns at his best, really. I mean, in many ways. And I say that, and I'm not even a huge fan of the emotional spectrum, but I was glued to the storyline. It's the concept I have issues with, but the storytelling I loved. I mean, how could you not love Blackest Night? Good Lord. How can you not love all the stories that flowed from that?
Sinestro War was nuts.
Sinestro, and everything that flowed from that, hope, the Red Lanterns, anger, hatred, and the I thought, honestly, I thought they were going to go in a different direction in exploring the various emotions. I thought they could have gone in some different directions. I thought they were, I will say this, even though I thought it was somewhat predictable in some of the things they did, it was always fun. It was always fun, and it was always worth the read. And I never finished a story where I thought to myself, well, I regret reading that. No, it's fun. And the thing is about Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns understands something that not every comic book writer gets, and that is he, more often than not, he usually gives a happy ending. The good guys win, and he might challenge them, but they still win in the end. I mean, even through Blackest Night, the good guys still win. And that's important in an apocalypse. I want to make sure that when we fight the undead, we win. That's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it is so spectacular what Jeff Johns accomplishes in throughout this entire run, and even like Tomasi and Green Lantern Corps kind of weaving through it, is that it feels so quintessentially superhero comics, and it feels so quintessentially DC comics. But at the same time, it breaks new ground in the way that they're able to take traditional superhero style storytelling and make it complex, right? And make this, an excellent work of science fiction besides, just the heights that a normal superhero comics would assume to. It's so good. And again, you really want something to be able to sink your teeth in while you have all this free time. I'm telling you, if you read all of the at least good supplemental material, like I was saying, including the Green Lantern Corps and some of those tie-ins, I'm sure you can look up recommended reading lists online. It's such a good book to just immerse yourself into. And it's funny because I walked into this when I first started reading Green Lantern, I was interested sheerly because of Jeff Johns. And I didn't give a flying shit about the Green Lanterns. I didn't care at all. I can't pretend like I was ever a big Green Lantern fan prior to this. But this run made me a huge Green Lantern guy. Sorry, I just heard some cats like fighting outside. So I was trying to stop and take note of it. But yeah, this book easily made Hal Jordan one of my top 5 favorite characters at DC. So I can't recommend it enough. But without me going on blabbering about it, ComicBoom, what is your next recommendation?
My next recommendation is, in my view, Warren Ellis's greatest work to date. And Warren Ellis has wrote a lot. And it's Planetary. It's absolutely incredible. I got the Absolute edition. I love it so much. It's in 2 volume. It's a 2-volume set, but you could pick it up in trade form. What Planetary is, they're archaeologists of the impossible. And they are archaeologists that have superpowers. There's Blake, Jaquita, Ross. There's a slew of characters that they're trying to avoid the apocalypse themselves. It involves time. It involves time travel. It involves crazy. It involves. It's all the there's so much wonder to it, and it's so beautifully drawn by John Cassidy that I don't know. Planetary was published alongside The Authority when Mark Millar was writing The Authority, and these are the titles. This is when the Authority became popular and Planetary was really popular. I think it took 3 or 4 years for Planetary to complete its 24 issue run, because it was 24 issues of the Planetary that came out, and Warren Ellis finally finished it. But it is a masterful work of art, and it's so all I can tell you is it's another masterpiece, because each individual story tells a self-contained story of something that happened in the past. You meet Sherlock Holmes in the past, or all these characters you thought didn't exist, they actually do exist in the past, and they connect with them. And there's a wider story, and they have individual stories, all these fantastic characters, and it's all part of one wondrous, massive, wider narrative. And it ends, I love the ending to it. And the concepts that Warren Ellis plays with, particularly with time, are just it's easy to follow, it's easy to read. At the time, this was such a popular series, it crossed over at different times with it didn't cross over with anything else, but it did have individual stories where even the Justice League, there was even a crossover with Justice League, but it didn't.
Wasn't there a Batman crossover as well?
What's that?
Wasn't there a Batman crossover as well?
I think there was, but it didn't affect. It had nothing. It did not in any way impact the main storyline of Planetary. It was published by Wildstorm, and Jim Lee made sure it didn't impact that. And it's still considered, I think, one of the best. I think it actually had an impact on the medium. It's that good. It's the one series that I don't know why more people don't talk about, and I don't know why Warren Ellis doesn't go back to it. I really wish he would, because it's fantastic. But it is what it is. But guys, if you can pick up Planetary, you can get the trades, I think, probably in probably cheaper $5 or $10 bins. Pick it up, you won't be disappointed.
I'm ashamed, as somebody who wants to get into the industry and who claims to have.
Taylor Pecker took 10 years. I didn't know that. It was a long time. But it was worth it. I didn't realize it was 10 years. Wow. But yeah, incredible.
Which leads me to assume it reads much better in trade, because there's no.
Oh yes.
But yeah, no. What I was saying was, as somebody who wants to break into the industry and is somebody who comes on here and talks about comics on the internet, I've always been ashamed that I haven't read any of Warren Ellis's Wildstorm stories, whether it be Planetary or The Authority or anything along those lines. And I've heard nothing but great things about how kind of top shelf the storytelling is in these books. And it's something that, now that I'm thinking about it with this quarantine time, it might have to be something that I sit down and dig my teeth into. So I'm really glad you mentioned it, and it's definitely on my radar. So that's absolutely awesome. And hearing you talk about it gets me really excited to dig into it myself. So hopefully I can go out and find a copy. So
yeah, it's one of those things. Just a quick comment. It's one of those things where when you're done reading Planetary, you will, and then you have to go and read something like Bendis. And I know I'm picking on Bendis, but he's an easy pick right now. It is miles. It's art. It's masterful. It's absolutely masterful. It's like that. It's just incredible. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I guess maybe good things are worth the wait. I don't know if it's worth 10 years worth the wait, but it's like one of those things. Once it's collected in form, you don't realize how long it took to came out, but it's worth picking up.
Yeah, listen, 10 years ago, I was 12. So, it says a lot. But, now that I can read it in completion, that's awesome. I do want to address in the chat, JT Gamer says that his comic shop is not selling new comics anymore. Last one was Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer, was number 39. I'm not keeping up with Nick Spencer's Spider-Man, so I don't know how far the run is now. And I'm curious, is that like as a whole, like did your shop close down, or is it just temporary for the quarantine? And with that being said, regardless, I hope you can find a good spot to get some books, man. Best of luck to you on that. So my next book is going to be, it's a Vertigo title. It is one of my favorite comic book runs, stories, whatever you want to classify it as, of all time, like a top 3 of all time. And I think you could definitely make an argument that it is the best run in comics of all time. It's I don't know if it's an argument I'm willing to make because I'm super freaking indecisive. But it is one of the most, God, highly artistic forms of comic book storytelling, both in the art and in the writing. And this title launched this writer into the stratosphere. And it has inspired one of my tattoos. And that's Neil Gaiman's Sandman with this beautiful absolute. It is something like none other. This is one of those comics that transcends the genre. It is one of those books that even the snobby literary society types will look at and praise. It is the only comic to ever win a World Fantasy Award, which after this book won it, they banned comics for at least a year because it was such an insult to that kind of circle of people. It is absolutely astounding, and especially if you are a big reader of literature, it includes so much in there and weaves so much in that enriches the experience. But you don't necessarily need to have read anything that it references, whether it be tangential or not, to enjoy it. It's complex, it's long, it's spanning, it spawned out, its own section of the DC, more like the Vertigo universe, so to speak. Like it launched its, and I'm not saying specifically the current Sandman universe of books, but it did spawn a number of great titles out of it. Neil Gaiman redefined this corner of the DC universe into something that is so fantastic. And again, my goal was to give you guys some recommendations that you could really sit there and spend time to read. And Sandman, whether it be its 75 enumerated issues or the tie-ins or the specials, or if you want to go into the original books of magic and things of that nature, it's absolutely astounding. And I really can't speak highly enough about this series. Sandman, oh dude, I am just so too passionate about this story to aptly describe it, and I can't recommend it enough for you guys, especially if you want something that is just gonna take your comic book reading experience to the next level.
Full disclosure, I collected comic. I read Sandman for the first time about 10 years ago. And considering it's been out for whatever, 30, 35 years or longer, that's saying something. I got the absolute edition just like you. It's downstairs in my on my bookshelf. I just got the first volume of that. I've only read the first omnibus. I know there's like 3 more, I think there is. And I agree with you. The first, I could see why it was so compelling. I love his take on the Sandman. There's a magical element to it, introducing introducing the Sandman and death and all the nocturnals, or I forget what they're called, the endless. Sorry, thank you. And I know it was asked in the chat about I think there's been numerous Sandman one-shots that have come out. And what I find about the Sandman one-shots, like Nocturnals, and I was one shot, and there's a couple other ones. I find that they're all accessible. They're all the stories are wondrous. They're magical. Neil Gaiman has a gift for being able to write mythology in a way that someone like myself, I've never been inclined to really understand or appreciate mythology. He writes it in such a way that I get it, and even his god, what is it? There's another American Gods, right?
I got that book right down there.
Yeah, so even that is I've yet to watch it on TV. That's one thing I'm hoping to watch during the apocalypse. Actually, I'd love to watch that. I love the concept. I've read the first 6 issues in the comic book series, and I really like it. The idea of modern day people being personifications of gods. And he does it in a better way than there's another indie book that deals with it. But in any event, it's a good read.
No one tackles mythology like Neil Gaiman, because he's simultaneously able to take something that exists and do respect by it, but also drive it into a totally different direction. You bring up American Gods. American Gods is like one of my top 5 favorite novels of all time. Like, I love that book. And that book has defined my writing style in so many ways, and probably more than it should have. when I took like a grad level expository writing class last semester, you know, and I had mentioned it to you, I think, how we had to like write novellas. And just a quick reference, Brevin Campbell, you said you have the American Gods novelization. It was originally a novel, so they graphic novelized it. But it, you know, it's so funny because when I turned in my first couple of chapters to my professor, who is also like a professional editor and writer himself, he literally said to me, he's like, "You sound like Neil Gaiman." And he looked at me and he said, "You need to stop." Because and I adore his style of writing to a fault because of how expansive it is. And it's so kooky and peculiar. And there's just something about Sandman that you can really feel like you're diving into a totally different world. And I do want to answer Brevin Campbell's question in the chat. Is this the Sandman prequel book any good? And I assume you're talking about Sandman Overture. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It was incredible. Arguably some of the best art in any of the Sandman titles ever, with G.H. Williams, I believe, the third who did it. Absolutely stunning. I would recommend reading Sandman first, but you could do the Overture first. But I think that reading Sandman first and then kind of going back to experience that will really enrich that experience, which is odd. It's a little bit different, kind of, even though it takes place before the run, it was written after, but I think you should still read it after. And Taylor Pector in the chat says that going with Sandman, he would recommend Mike Carey's Lucifer. I've heard so many good things about his Lucifer, and I think I've maybe read an issue or two, and I think it was when I had first started reading Sandman, when I was first getting into comics, and quite frankly, it was back before I truly appreciated Sandman, because I don't think I was of like I don't even want to say like I'll leave it. I'll say it. Yeah, I don't think I was smart enough to understand Sandman at the time, and by default, I don't think I got Lucifer. So, but I should definitely give it another shake. Absolutely. But yeah, Sandman, absolutely one of my biggest recommendations. Can't talk positively enough about it. Comic Boom. What are you gonna follow up with that?
A very different twist, a twist to more crazy zaniness, espionage, and fun, and that is J. Scott Campbell's Danger Girl. Now this has been out for quite a while. It's probably been out for 20 years now. By J. Scott Campbell and Andy Hartnell. This is just espionage with sexy women. This is basically like Charlie's Angels, but it's fun. It's got, look, sometimes I just like a little bit of tits and ass. Let's be blunt, right? Right? I mean, look, unlike Joe Peak Show, if I'm going to stroke to something, I want to make it good. I want to make it worth my while. And J. Scott Campbell knows how to draw something that, I might contemplate doing that. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it on an absolute hardcover, because it's kind of a little bit pricey and it's really hard to wash out. So I'm told.
You sound like you have experience washing that out.
I said that's what I'm telling. Somebody told me that. I think you told me that, didn't you?
Okay, cover your tracks. Okay.
I think you told me that after you finished reading Sandman, right?
Me? Yeah. Oh, probably. I mean, I won't put it past me. Yeah. I mean, you've seen me a little bit tipsy, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was something I said.
I'm just saying, there's something about when you go through these pages, man. I mean, this is like gorgeous artwork. I mean, look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da. There are worse fates. Sometimes a little bit of espionage with a little bit of TNA. That's what you need to get your mind off the apocalypse. Sit back, sip a Corona. Again, COVID 12-pack Corona. That's what you want. And just, sometimes there's something about, look, I'm not going to lie. This isn't a complex tale. All right. This isn't like brilliant. This isn't the most brilliant writing you'll ever read, but it's coherent. The plot makes sense. There's somebody that goes on their team, betrays them. It's a typical James Bond plot in many ways. It's not going to, this did not rewrite the wheel, but sometimes you just want to get from point A to point B and read a good story. This to me is like the equivalent of a popcorn movie. Sometimes you just want to relax the brain. This is not a Grant Morrison tale where you have to reread it 12 times to get the main point. This is just good TNA, good action, good sequences, puts a smile on your face, and you can't go wrong.
See, I've never heard of it, so that's really cool. It's something I'll definitely have to check out. J. Scott Campbell is a legendary comic book artist, so
Yeah.
at least visually, it's going to work out really well, even though all of his female faces look exactly the same.
Well, yeah. Well, this is his earlier work. He'd go on to become, obviously, he's the go-to artist right now. But I don't know why he's never gone back to Danger Girl. I wish he would, because I think it would. Actually, I think he even is selling it now. But he can't beat his original stuff.
Interesting. I feel like you might have this next, and it's not my recommendation, it's Taylor's in the chat. I feel like you might have this on the back burner, and I'd be surprised if you didn't. Taylor recommends the Palmiotti Gray Jonah Hex All-Star Western run, which, obviously is huge. Give me 2 seconds. I know you can talk on it at length, so I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah. The Palmiotti Gray Jonah Hex All-Star Western run is definitely something that you can read. I would recommend the All-Star Western run in particular. It ends with Jonah Hex and Tallulah Black riding off or sailing off into the sunset. Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray decided to give, and Darwin Cook drew that final issue of All-Star Western. They gave Jonah Hex a happy ending. Here's a guy that has a ridiculously dark past. He was the darkest type of hero that the Wild West needed, and he was one dark SOB, but he was the SOB that the Wild West needed. And one great thing about a good Western is, and Jonah Hex encapsulates that, is, he comes across somebody he's that loner, he's that stranger in a strange land. He's the man with no name, but with the scarred face, and he wanders in, and there's a problem, and he doesn't want to get involved, but there's always something that forces his hand, and he ends up having to kick some butt and usually take names and usually kill a lot of bad guys. And that's exactly what Jonah Hex does. There's something feel good, and there's something cathartic about experiencing an adventure story through the character of Jonah Hex, because whatever anguish you're feeling in these apocalyptic times, no matter how bad you're feeling, if somebody's really pissing you off or you want to vent a little bit, you can read a Jonah Hex comic, and you can imagine that when Jonah Hex is blowing somebody's head off, that that's what you're doing. And he seems to be doing it quite a bit, and he does it reluctantly, because Jonah Hex, in many ways, he's like our dark side. We don't really want to piss people off. We don't really want to hurt people, but some people just have it coming, right? Especially in these dark times. I mean, everybody whining about COVID-19 or whatever it is. And what do you do? But Darwin Cook, fortunately, Darwin Cook, fantastic artist. He died way before his time. He died I think he died 2016. Anyways, tragic loss. Jimmy Palmiotti, Justin Gray, that Jonah Hex All-Star Western run is absolutely a classic. I very much recommend it. Taylor Pector, good call, great call. I actually did not have it here, only because I got a bunch here. It's 36 that it got stopped at. Thank you, JT Gamer. All-Star Western stopped at issue 36. Okay, I would have guessed 39, but I'll go with you. You guys got access to the internet here. I'm surrounded by books. So thank you for the correction, JT Gamer. And all right. Yeah, so I think it's now your turn.
Cool. Sorry about that. I kept hearing like this monotonous tapping, and I was like, is somebody like outside, like just tapping all over my place? Like somebody trying to find refuge during the quarantine or something? So I was like, I think this is worth exploring for 1 second. So my next one, it's another long spanning run. It is fairly recent, and it really evolves on this character and this character's mythos, and it's Jason Aaron's Thor. I think from beginning.
You stole one of mine. You finally stole one of mine. There it is.
Yes,
you got it. Yeah,
finally. That was the goal from the beginning. Yeah. Jason Aaron's Thor from beginning to end is absolutely enthralling. And it's funny because I very much read comics for theme, but the storytelling, the story itself, the plot was so good that oftentimes I totally forgot about theme. And when you really read deeply in it, it is still ever present throughout the run. And, Jason Aaron does something that I think a lot of comic writers and a lot of writers in general really struggle to do, and that is simultaneously build on the world and on these characters individually. And it is so, so strong. And I know people give the Jane Foster Thor era a lot of flack, and it's arguably some of the best parts of the run. It is so, so good. And there's a story reason for pretty much everything. This is the run that made me absolutely love Thor, and it inspired me to read further and go back into runs like Walt Simonson's and Matt Fractions and J. Michael Straczynski. And he's treated with top tier artists pretty much the entire way through. You just held up God Butcher, and it is a phenomenon. But even aside from that, there are plot details from the very beginning that are resolved all the way in the end, and he just weaves everything in almost perfectly. So I can't recommend it enough. Boom, what do you have to say about it?
Oh man, I could talk for a long time on this. It was one of my picks. This is you can just a quick comment. You can see why Donny Cates and Jason Aaron. I just know why they get along so well, because there's so many similarities between Donny Cates's style and Jason Aaron's, particularly with the way they approach mythology. And you really see similarities here between Donny Cates' God Country and Thor, Jason Aaron's Thor, in particular to the theme of the relationship that mankind, that humanity has with gods, and the relationship that humanity has with its own faith. And the Jane Foster Thor, it was Jane Foster that got me into Odinson Thor. The irony is that, remember all that hype that so many people seem to not like Jane Foster Thor. I fell in love with Jane Foster when she was Thor, and it was her humanity as expressed through her battle with cancer. And I mean, that issue's Thor 704, that I cried when I read that. When her mother tells her when her dying mother tells her, Jane, find a God to believe in. And Jane Foster had lost her husband and lost her son, and she couldn't find a God to believe in, not even Thor, because Thor wasn't there. Odinson failed, and she's looking for a God to believe in, but yet, ironically, Mjolnir chose her. She was worthy, and it was through. And then when she finally believes in herself, and she beats the cancer. She has a choice. She can live and embrace life because she's found her faith again, or she can reach for that hammer and know she'll die. And she reaches for that hammer to go to battle Magog. And it's so uplifting and so incredible. And the art at first by Jason, by Ribic. And then it was
Dodderman.
Russell
Dodderman.
Right. Thank you, Russell Dodderman. Fantastic art. The themes of God and faith and what it all means, just absolutely incredible. Easily, if you're going to sit back and read a run, read God Butcher, because Gore the God Butcher challenges Thor, tells Thor that gods aren't worthy to believe in. And then we go into Jane Foster, and Jane Foster's challenged because she doesn't believe in gods either, but yet she chooses to believe in Asgard, and she gives her life for it. And that journey, that character arc, that character mode is absolutely incredible. And I was so at odds with various members whom I love and respect, who didn't like that run. I thought, how can you not love Jane Foster Thor like that? That was incredible. And I'm following her with Valkyrie too, actually.
No, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. It also recontextualizes worthiness, under this lens, and we get to explore what exactly it means to be worthy of godhood, right? Not just worthy of the power of Thor.
Yeah.
And it challenges that kind of almost theological aspect of humanity and what we choose to believe in, whether it is actually kind of in a religious context or in a number of other spiritual contexts. It is so powerful because Thor is is challenged in a way that is entirely new and different. And then again, when you get to bring in Jane Foster, not only does it elaborate on her character, but they use her also as this kind of mechanism to evolve Odinson Thor. It is a huge lesson for the character. And for something that's so big and epic, there's a lot of really deep character stuff. Like,
Oh,
like one piece of
sure.
symbolism that I didn't pick up on until like the middle of the Jane Foster run. You know what I remember like the moment I realized this, and I actually almost messaged you. You realize that the War of the Realms is a parallel to the cancer, like running through Jane Foster's body, how it infects all these different parts of the world, and the world being Jane Foster. Like, it is such complex storytelling between that and, like, you had so eloquently stated regarding how these themes are woven into like worthiness and what it means to truly be a god and to be one worthy of faith.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just such an incredible storytelling, such an incredible instance of storytelling, and it's wrapped up so well in the King Thor run by the end.
Yeah.
It just pulls everything together. And
And
again, and we talk, and I've been saying this whole time, one of the through lines from my recommendations are something that you can just sit down and enjoy. And this was something I was so glad to do when I was doing my research before my Marvel interview. I was rereading parts that I had already read and then digging into, newer territory with War of the Realms. And it's such a good read.
it really is. And I'm almost, we would be negligent if we didn't mention that the Thor movie Love and Thunder is arguably going to be incorporating the Jane Foster storyline, or to put it another way, it damn well better. And I got to tell you, if Love and Thunder it captures even 10% of the character development of Jane Foster, or that epic scene or Jane Foster's fate, I mean, there's no reason why I shouldn't be crying at the end of Love and Thunder, because that Love and Thunder, I'm telling you, I think why would they choose Jane Foster? Why would they choose that storyline? They chose it because it's good.
Yeah.
Kevin Feige knows that's a fantastic storyline. If they capture that magic, if they capture that story the way it should be captured, because they could pretty much, that thing is laid out perfectly. They could lay it out panel for panel. I can imagine that final, those issues 704, 705, and 706 of Thor. I can imagine that entire sequence as a movie, and it would be fantastic.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. It can serve so many purposes, and I think it would, just based on the fact that the comic book run has longevity, it would add longevity to Thor's line of films. It would give you so much more room to move in, that is so modern and I think so beloved. And I couldn't have said it any better than you did, man. Absolutely great. It's such a good read. Taylor Pector in the chat brings up Hellblazer being a great series to sink your teeth into. So many great writers wrote it over its 300 issue run. Garth Ennis's run is definitely his favorite of all of them. Yeah, it's a great recommendation if you're really into the supernatural and the occult and this kind of offhand characterization and tonality. It's a great book. It's a great run to sink your teeth into. And Taylor, you're 100% right. I don't think I've read as much of it as you have, but it's one of those books, kind of like Daredevil, who has been blessed with just such a long span of great creators on the book. So that's an awesome recommendation.
And well, Hellblazer is a really great recommendation. One thing I've always loved about Hellblazer is that it's another one of those characters that when writers write Hellblazer, more often than not, I enjoy this story because there's something about Hellblazer that will elevate most writers' writing to a higher quality. Because, and this is my theory, and I'm just going to be blunt about it because I always am, Hellblazer is an asshole.
Yeah.
And he's inclined to be an asshole, and he's blunt. And you can accomplish so much more by being blunt. And he's a manipulative narcissist, but he's on the side of angels. Although he does like a devil to win once in a while, which makes him interesting. And the way that he can, I mean, there was even one comic book where he talked a demon into killing himself, for God's sakes. I mean, just brilliant the way he manipulates and deceives, and he does it all through conversation. I mean, most of the time he's a master of, in many ways he's a master of the occult, and he knows all these spells. But most Hellblazer is interesting because his superpower is his mouth.
Yeah.
It's his mouth. It's his intellect and his manipulation and his narcissism and his characterization, and just the way that he can get. It's why he drives Zatanna crazy. And I think it drives, and one of the reasons why that relationship between him and Zatanna is always interesting, when he does enter the mainstream DC universe, is because Zatanna probably doesn't quite understand. She probably resents the fact that she's attracted to the asshole.
Yeah, no, I mean and it's so complex. You bring up the fact that Constantine, he is so untraditional comic book protagonist, and the types of stories that are being told within the run are so untraditional and yet incredible. It's one of those realms of comics that push the medium forward, and it is such an example of how impactful Vertigo was for its time and for comics moving forward. It's a great recommendation, and I'm glad that you bring that up, Taylor. Comic Boom, what is your next Comics in Quarantine recommendation?
Well, I'm going to recommend. You know what? I'm going to go. This one is. I want to mention this in case we don't have enough time. Darwin Cook's A New Frontier.
Yep.
I can't. I have to mention this. It's Darwin Cook is my favorite artist of all time. He's number one. Number one. He was tied there with Kurt Swan for a while, but I ranked him. I put him number one. Nobody draws a smile better than Darwin Cook. He is the epitome of joy. When I think of DC Rebirth, I think of an image of Darwin Cook. Bottom line, I think of these smiling characters because this is what it's all about. And The New Frontier is the epitome of that. It takes place from, basically in the early years of at the end of the Golden Age to the beginning of the Silver Age, the 1960s, and the beautiful, America was filled with such hope and renaissance and moving forward, and the coming together of the Justice League, and the way Darwin Cook masterfully moves all the players of the DC universe together, from Dr. Fate to Barry Allen the Flash to Hal Jordan with Carol Ferris and Superman and Lois Lane and Aquaman and Mira, and it's just incredible. And Martian Manhunter with Batman and young Robin and the Teen Titans. It's impossible to read New Frontier and not have a smile on your face. And it's all the major players are there. This is a work of art. This is an absolute work of art. And for new readers of comic books, I'm sure that sometimes I wonder, some people must think I'm a real jerk, because if you come and you watch just a handful of my videos and you happen to get the ones where I'm reviewing something that Bendis writes, or you might think that I'm an angry person. I'm actually not. I'm an optimist. But you have to understand, it's because I've read greatness. You know what I mean? I've read it, and I've seen what the possibilities of the medium are. And you don't have to be reading a long time to appreciate comics. But I tell you what, you sure appreciate good comics when you read a slew of bad ones. And it just so happens right now DC's on a low point, but I'm not gonna talk about that. Bottom line is, New Frontier is fantastic. If you love the 1960s, you like that spirit of optimism, you like that America at its finest, right on the precipice of its greatness, and superheroes at the forefront, man. Darwin Cook's New Frontier, man. Pick it up. Check it out. You can buy them in trade form again. You don't have to buy the Absolute Edition. I just got the Absolute Edition because I love it that much.
You did it again, and you sniped another one. Yeah, I don't think I can really add much. New Frontier is what superhero. It is the perfect culmination of superhero comics and Americana all in one. It recontextualizes superhero comics for the some of the decades at the time that it had spanned, and its impact on America and its impact on the world, and it really puts these characters up on a platform that I think should remind you while reading why they're so iconic and why they're so everlasting. It is arguably one of the most perfect executions in superhero comics ever. And if anybody were to ever say that this is, their favorite comic of all time or the best story of all time, I'm not comfortable arguing against it. It is incredible. And obviously, you see that big old absolute there. There's plenty of content to breathe into. But if you just want a story that will make you appreciate DC Comics at its core, The New Frontier is the comic to do it. And on Darwin Cook, I wasn't originally going to recommend this title just because it's not big, but this is it's for me, although much smaller, and I'm fully admitting my bias. I think it's just as good as The New Frontier, albeit smaller. Batman Ego is one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. Unfortunately, I lent out my deluxe edition to a friend, so I can't hold it up and show you it in all of its glory. But it is incredible. It is one of the best character studies of the Batman Bruce Wayne dichotomy ever. Darwin Cook, his art there, I think, is especially resonant with like the Batman animated series style in that
that was his first work at DC, actually, and his art got better. That was one of his first works at DC's.
I love it. I love how toned down it was. I love the choices of color blocking and blocking of like the darker tones. I think that the character acting was phenomenal. I think the way that he's challenging the Batman mythos within it is incredible. Like I said, it's one of like, if you guys go back way to the beginning of my channel, it is one of those books that I recommended in like a top 5 Batman books for new readers. And it's not one that I think a lot of people really talk about it, and unrightfully so, because it is not only one of the best books for new readers, but it is one of the best Batman stories ever. And if you just want something, again, it's a little bit contradictory to the through line for my recommendations, but if you want something that is really quick and digestible, it is absolutely the book for you.
Batman Ego, yeah, I mean, it's Batman Ego is a classic. It always will be. Batman Ego is the classic. It's Bruce Wayne, Batman confronting his demons, asking himself the question, how much, should he use lethal force? Shouldn't he? How far should the Batman go to battle crime? Who controls the Batman? Is the Batman his own entity? Does Batman control Bruce Wayne, or does Bruce Wayne control Batman? It's that personality. It's a battling of his two personas of Batman versus Bruce Wayne, and also throwing in that the young Bruce Wayne and the innocence and the loss of innocence, and will Batman cross that line, and should he cross that line? What good is Batman if he just puts people in prison all the time and they always escape? Well, shouldn't a Batman kill? Wouldn't he be more effective? Those types of questions are what Darwin Cook wrestles with in Ego, and he does it very masterfully. And all in, I think it's only 48 pages, isn't it? Or I think it's a 40.
It's pretty contained. I think it's between 48 and 60 pages.
Right.
And with that being said, it's so great because I think that it builds so well on the kind of psychology of The Dark Knight Returns with the split personality between Bruce and Batman.
Yeah.
I when I was doing my recommendation for new readers, I couldn't have rightfully put Dark Knight Returns on there for new readers, but the more I thought about it, it really is kind of an elaboration on Batman in like year 3 within like the Frank Miller continuity. I feel, you kind of have the year 1, and then you can get in the Ego and then go Dark Knight Returns, and they feel so succinct in the way that they're establishing who Batman is. And it's astounding. You broke it down best when you were kind of discussing the dichotomy between Bruce and Batman, and ultimately how that reflects on the character and his motivations. And again, not to mention, I don't think either of us, if you give us the time, will ever shut up about how good Darwin Cook's art is. It is so great at capturing what comic books should be. So absolutely phenomenal.
So what's your next choice?
So my next choice, I think, is arguably like one of the most predictable ones on my list. It also showed up on my Batman for New Readers, and it's really, I mean, Batman, the Batman and by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sales. So it includes Long Halloween and Dark Victory. You know, when people ask me which I like more, I can never differentiate because it feels like one big story to me. And I think that, you know, it's funny because of the nature of one being the follow-up to another, one does things better than the other and vice versa. But they're both absolutely incredible. It's a great way to, modernize at the time Batman's continuity and consolidate it. The tone is so great at capturing the kookiness of his rogues gallery and something that is inherently DC Comics and Gotham City, while also adding that noir sensibility and making this a true mystery. And again, Jeff Loeb, especially at the time, could have been considered one of the greatest Batman writers of all time. And Tim Sale has such an interesting and quirky stylistic art. You know, when I first approached it, Tim Sale for me was one of the first artists that wasn't like a traditional comic book DC house style that I felt
Yeah. You froze on my end. Sorry. I can't. Your image froze.
like because all right, are we good?
Yeah, I can see you now. Sorry, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it happened on my end too. Can everybody who's watching, are we
I,
good?
yeah, I think you're good. I think you're good now.
Okay. Um, but yeah, I don't really know where I left off, but where did I cut off?
Um, Sorry. You're just
Like,
talking about Tim Sale or Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale and basically their legacy with Batman.
okay, yeah. So Tim Sale was one of the first stylistic artists that I was ever able to appreciate because he captures so well, the larger than life kind of angle of these characters and the Gotham City mythos, while being able to tie in so well to Jeff Loeb's, inherently detective driven story. And again, it's there's a lot of body to it. There's between the two, there's like 26 plus issues. I think this includes Catwoman When in Rome, which is another great story, and maybe Batman Haunted Nights, but I'm not sure. Um, yeah, it's a quintessential Batman story. It's a great story if you're kind of wanting to get into the early continuity of Batman. This is kind of like a year two
And
ish.
and and I think it's worth pointing out too that Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale both had they made a lot of money doing that. They had a lot of very good collaborations on the early years of Heroes with Daredevil Yellow, with Spider-Man Blue, and also with uh, the Hulk Green, the Incredible Hulk Green, all those series. So they had and Superman for All Seasons, another great read written by them and drawn by Tim Sale. So anything by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, I'm surprised that they haven't collaborated since because they had a lot of very successful collaborations.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a classic. It is an instant classic, and I think it means something, especially with Batman, because there are so many great stories out there that, when you ask anybody for recommended reading on Batman, I think 9 times out of 10 somebody's going to give you, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and it's an evergreen story, and the art is so individually stylistic, but so potent at capturing the visual style or capturing this really really spectacularly individual visual style, but also being able to be narrative, right? And something that a lot of readers, I don't think, give enough credit to artists for. Not only does he have a cool style and all of his pinups look great, but the way he's setting up these pages make it feel cinematic, and it feels like you're it doesn't feel like you're reading something two-dimensional. You know, it almost feels like you're watching a really cool animated movie. Um, and yeah, with that, I can't recommend it enough. And I know a number of other people out there are going to tell you the same thing. But Boom, do you have a follow-up to that?
I do. I would recommend Hawkeye by Matt Fraction.
Hmm.
I was never into Hawkeye, the character of Clint Barton in the Marvel Comics universe. This was something where I never thought I'd enjoy reading. I read a few issues of it digitally, and I was blown away. It's so good, and of course, it introduces us to the young girl that would become the new Hawkeye.
Hmm.
And
Kate Bishop.
That's right, Kate Bishop. And the art here is really good. Asia did the art, and again, this is I've been very disappointed with Jimmy Olsen. Matt Fraction's Jimmy Olsen has been so disappointing because it's and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I thought Matt Fraction would modernize Jimmy Olsen a little bit or try to make him interesting or funny, but it's not funny at all. I don't find his stories interesting, and I really don't like what he's done with Jimmy Olsen, which is such the opposite of how I felt about his Hawkeye. His Hawkeye is funny, it's entertaining, but his Jimmy Olsen is the exact opposite of that. So part of me, full disclosure, part of me, I'm putting Hawkeye in there because it's a self-contained read. You can buy it in hardcover or trade paperback form. It's well worth it. It's great. You can get it cheaper digitally on Comixology, I think, for $12.99. It's well worth it. A lot of pages, fantastic art, and well worth the read. Well worth the read. And yeah, this in my view, this put actually Hawkeye on the map. It elevated a character that I thought was just nothing but a Green Arrow ripoff, and I think it actually surpassed Green Arrow in terms of a likable character. And the irony is that he's likable because he's so ridiculously imperfect, the way Matt Fraction wrote him. And I think it's funny what works for Hawkeye is not working for Jimmy Olsen, because Matt Fraction's trying to make Jimmy Olsen equally as imperfect, not realizing that Jimmy Olsen already was. Jimmy Olsen needed to improve. He didn't need to be written more like a loser, but that's a digression.
Fair. You know, it's that run, first of all, is going to be the number one recommendation if anybody asks for Hawkeye Rex. And it's also, I think, permanently impacted the character. You know, you go into the current Hawkeye Freefall run by Matthew Rosenberg, and it's very clear that, while different, it incorporates a lot of very tonal and stylistic qualities from that run. And I remember when that book was coming out, and I was just kind of getting into comics, and I was still, I think, for the most part, a DC purist back then. Tisk tisk, slap on the wrist. I remember hearing nothing but incredible things about it, and it's something that has been on my reading pile for a long time that I haven't gotten to. But you know, now that I picked up these issues of Hawkeye Freefall, I've been feeling very inclined to go back and check out that run. And you know, I really can't speak a lot on it, but I've heard nothing but fantastic things and how that's impacted the character. So good one. We also have another recommendation from Taylor Pechter in the chat. 52. It's a long, very readable, and it's one of those series that is both accessible and hinged on continuity at the same time. It's a great recommendation. It checks off all of those bubbles by being something, again, long enough to sink your teeth into, but also being accessible. And it's one of those kind of few books that are able to claim that they're exposing C and D list characters and making them feel important and in the most organic way possible. And because these stories were told on a weekly basis, the pace for something so long feels really appropriate, and it's really strong. And I know we've talked about 52 a couple times in the past. Boom. What do you have to say about that as a reading recommendation?
Well, first of all, let's be clear why 52 was successful. I mean, look at who wrote it. Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, Greg Rucka. Four of the top names right now in comics. They were top names at the time, and they're certainly top names now.
DeMatteis was also writing, I believe.
Fair enough. bottom line is they coordinated themselves very well. And, like I said, because you got top writers, it just goes to show you that they can write about arguably D or C list or even F list characters and actually make it compelling reading. For God's sakes, who would have thought that the adventures of elongated man could actually be compelling, of all things? But it was, and it was, it took place at a time when DC was. It was a year where it followed at the end of Infinite Crisis, where the Trinity took the year off. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman sort of took the year off. Batman was in a cave in Nanda Parbat. Clark Kent, Superman had taken a year off. Wonder Woman had sort of disappeared and would ultimately end up returning with a brief stint with Alan Heinberg, and even got a secret identity for a time. And so during that 1 year, that 52 was an experiment. It was one of Dan Didio's experiments, and it was a successful one. Unfortunately, it was followed up by crap down to Final Crisis. I mean, Countdown. And but in any event, that's another story. But yeah, it's an interesting part of DC history. The New 52. It showed that a weekly series could be done, and it did show what successful collaborations are capable of producing.
Yeah, and it really skyrocketed a lot of those characters into the limelight, and even if not to an extreme degree, at least enough to get these big name creators working on these titles. I mean, you see the introduction of Kate Kane, Batwoman, and you see the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The status quo shift from Renee Montoya into becoming the Question. And I mean, it's so good. And the cool thing is each one of those arcs feels super digestible as well. So you feel satisfied at the end of every arc. And that's an absolutely great recommendation for anybody out there looking to kind of dig into the corners of the DC universe, especially during what is arguably one of the most successful eras of DC line wide. So
yeah, and it was one of the earlier appearances of Black Adam and Isis as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's blessed with pretty consistently great art, especially for a weekly series. So that's definitely something worth mentioning. Yeah. But as we're kind of starting to close in on 2 hours, I think I'm going to make my final recommendation for the night for our Comics in Quarantine. And I feel like you guys had to have seen this coming. Batman Court of Owls.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest, my friend.
It is one of my favorite Batman stories of all time, warranting obviously my first absolute edition purchase. This is the book that got me into reading comics on a monthly basis and getting into the periodicals. And by that I mean Batman. I mean, you could do the whole run, because I think especially in trade, the entire run reads even better. But if you want to just dig into the best part of it, Court of Owls into City of Owls, the first 2 volumes, which is included in this absolute, are absolutely astounding. I think it's some of Greg Capullo's best art. It was Scott Snyder when he was at his hungriest to prove himself. And I think it is arguably one of the best stories he's ever told. I think I mean, just storytelling wise, and it challenges Batman in a very particular way that feels, fresh. And even though it does take from some of Batman's history with stories like the Black Glove and pulling the rug out from under him, I think it's under an entirely different context where Batman feels like he knows his city better than ever, and he finds out that he doesn't. And how does Batman overcome that? It is almost crippling for the character, and especially for him to be learning more about his city that he feels so inherently in tune with. It's astounding. And it's some of Greg Capullo at his best as well. This was the book that introduced me to his art. It's the book that made me love his art. And aside from being a little bit, I wouldn't call it highbrow storytelling, but it's a little bit more high art storytelling in terms of trying to pick up on the themes. But aside from that, the plot is absolutely enthralling. The journey that you're following within this run is psychologically complex. It's thrilling, but there are also so many great popcorn moments, like Batman in the Thrasher armor, fighting off all of those Talons. And there's something so great about it, and how it redefines Batman for the new era. For me, it's a top 10 Batman story of all time. And I'll argue that till the day I die. And this is the book that made me love Scott Snyder. I mean, hell, I have a Court of the Owls tattoo. That's how much I love this story. And the cool thing is, if you've been reading Batman prior and you have a lot of pre-existing knowledge of the character and his continuity, it feels even richer, right? Because Batman coming off of Batman Inc. And knowing the kind of predicament that he's in here, coming back to Gotham enriches it. But you can read it without really any predicated knowledge of the character and go along for this ride and enjoy it. So, you know, there's something to be said about a writer's ability to not only make it accessible to new fans, but also feel really rich if you're an older fan as well.
I remember my first impression when I began reading that Scott Snyder's run, and when it became apparent that this was a story about a secret society that had controlled Gotham for a long time, my first thought was, number one, it was very well written, and number two was it was such a good idea. It was one of those ideas, and this is so true of all great ideas. It made me wonder why nobody had thought of it before, or why nobody had tried to write it before. Because really, because now that cliche, I mean, that thing has been copied by other writers for other characters. The idea of a secret society hiding behind the scenes, controlling the narrative, et cetera, and in this case, controlling Batman. I mean, it was just very well done. And it, like you said, it contributed to the mythology in such a way that the last person, it really built on, you know, what Grant Morrison had done. And of course, Scott Snyder, unsurprisingly, is a big fan of Morrison, and you could tell that in his writing with Metal and everything else. And it really worked well. And I mean, full props, because quite frankly, Batman in the New 52, the DC never had a lot going for it in the New 52, in my humble opinion, other than Wonder Woman, which I loved, which is on my list, as well as Wonder Woman was going to be my next thing I was going to quickly mention. But yeah, no, Court of Owls, what can I say? It's fantastic.
It's so good, and it's one of those books, you know, that is genre spanning. You know, it gets elements of a thriller, horror, detective, you know, some very traditional superhero storytelling. It is so good, and it is Scott Snyder really at his best. You know, I say this a lot with immense respect to Scott Snyder. I think one of the issues that I've had with some of his more recent storytelling is that you can tell that A, he's out of his element, and B, that he's not hungry anymore. I think he's become a little bit comfortable, and I'm sure that's much better for his mental health and his sanity. And if I have to, you know, I'm not selfish enough to say, give me that back, because I want the man to be healthy and happy, of course. But, you know, there's something to be said about just you can tell how much Scott Snyder was not only trying to be original and tell something and break new ground, but he was also crossing his T's and dotting his I's. He was going back to check and make sure that this story was clean and concise at just telling a story. And a lot of writers don't do that in these big narrative epics. And you know, it's just so good. I love the way that this challenges the character. And I know you'd mentioned that there hadn't really been that secret society kind of narrative in Batman. We got a little bit of that in the Black Glove with Grant Morrison, but I think this builds on it in an entirely different way. And it challenges Batman because this is literally from the beginning of Gotham. And it's something that lingers about his legacy and his family's history. And I think it really challenges Bruce because not only in this situation does he feel prepared, right? And he feels comfortable, which Batman doesn't often feel comfortable, but it is a very rare situation where he does and still gets the rug wiped out from under him. It cemented the Court of Owls as one of, you know, the best, I guess, you know, I don't even know how to say, like, I guess I would constitute it as like a single concept of a rogue, but it constituted it as one of Batman's greatest rogues ever. Yeah. And it's clear that it's been impactful because a number of other writers, and including, you know, Scott Snyder, have taken the Court of Owls and reapplied them to a number of other stories. It's just phenomenal. It is so good. And, you know, when I read this book, I wasn't really picking up on thematic storytelling, but the story is so good in and of itself that if you're not that type of reader, and that's totally okay, it is still immensely enjoyable. And as I got older and I was able to read into those deeper things, it made me appreciate the story so much more. So between writing and art, you know, from cover to cover, It's an absolutely phenomenal story. And if you're looking to get into Batman, or you're maybe, a fan who might have been reading Batman for a while, that is just looking for one of the best Batman stories of all time, I can't recommend it enough. But I do want to give Comic Boom some time to talk a little bit about the New 52 Wonder Woman, because I know you're probably equally as passionate about that as I am about Court of Owls.
Yeah, just the great thing about Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman in the New 52 is that because the New 52 was short-lived, which I think it was short-lived. The fact is, Brian Azzarello's New 52 run was only 36 issues long on Wonder Woman. So, and it was discarded because Brian Azzarello, let's be blunt. Brian Azzarello, I kind of like his personality, but he doesn't give great interviews, and he's very sarcastic, and he's got a dry wit. I love it. But I mean, at the same time, I admit, quite frankly, he's, I don't know if he quite had. I think maybe he rubbed a lot of Wonder Woman fans the wrong way. He made waves when he had Wonder Woman call another character, one of her female villains, a bitch during the run. He made waves when he had Orion slap her ass and kiss her. It was, quite frankly, he made waves when he made her the God of War. All of this, I thought he was making her interesting, and he did. He made her phenomenally interesting, and he made her fight badass characters, and she stood up to her gods, and she didn't take nonsense, and she kicked ass. And at the end of the day, in that 36 issue, when she's battling that god killer, she shows her compassion then. But it's just the art here by Cliff Chiang was it was an acquired taste, I think, for some, but it's a really good story, and it's an accessible one. It's only 36 issues long, and I think for the apocalypse, if you're sitting back, or if you're just sitting back there and you're sipping, and you could buy this digitally, probably the whole thing for like $14, $15 American. It's well worth it, and you'll get satisfaction out of it. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's got great characters. It's got beautiful art. It's well worth it. And hey, I mean, that's what it's about, enjoying. It's about enjoying the comic book and having an ending that's satisfying.
Yeah, it's interesting because unlike, most people, that was my first exposure to Wonder Woman. That was my first Wonder Woman. And, getting on into eventually Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman, I do very much feel like, and this is a hot take, I think that both of those Wonder Womans exist together. I think that they are two separate sides of Diana. And the thing I love about the way Brian Azzarello handles this is, under the context of a society that's of women, of warrior women who've existed for thousands of years, I think that it broadens the scope of what it might mean in a sociological context, and especially them as warriors, and it reintroduces, the Greek pantheon in relation to Wonder Woman in an entirely new light. But I think that it fits really, really well in a way, because I think that it adds versatility to Wonder Woman, and a level of versatility to Wonder Woman that she had never seen. Because I do very much feel like if you have the right writer, they can go in there and weave Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman and Rucka's Wonder Woman into the same character. Because yes, she's compassionate. Yes, she is loving. Yes, she is graceful. But she's also a badass warrior. And I think that those are two very important sides that both deserve just as much credit. So I'm really glad you brought this up. And again, I love, and I know there seems to generally be two different camps between the Rucka and the Azzarello, and I guess this is just an articulation of how much I am the middle of the fence type of guy. But it's a great story, and it's great art, and it challenges the mythos. So
I'm just going to say this: one of the aspects of this story that was built upon inadequately, but it was interesting, was people forget that during Brian Azzarello established that the Amazons every 100 years would go out and they would attack sailors and rape sailors for their sperm. That's how they populated their race. He answered the question, how do Amazons reproduce? Rape. They rape men. That's how they survived. They raped men every 100 years. They raped sailors for their sperm. And if they had and when they gave birth, what did it, they originally killed all their male offspring. So if they gave birth to men, to young boys, young male infants, they would kill them. Well, Hephaestus, the god that would build their weapons, he saw what they were doing with these young infants, and he took all the male Amazons, and he took them down to him in the pits of hell, where they became his slaves, and they helped him build weapons, and he loved them as his own children. And so that's where the concept of the Manazons came. You may have remembered about the male Amazons, and and Wonder Woman, when she became the god of war and was also became queen of Themyscira, she united the male Amazons with the Amazons, and it was an epic storyline, and it was so cool. And they could have done so much with that. Unfortunately, they introduced Donna Troy, and they had under a different writer, they had Donna Troy wipe out the male Amazons in a massacre and made her a psychopath. But anyways, that wasn't under Azzarello, but Azzarello had fresh ideas, really good ideas, and he wasn't afraid to answer the questions harshly, saying, yeah, guess what? The Amazons weren't all rosy. It's, Greg Rucka treats the Amazons like porcelain glass. You gotta be very careful. They're perfect women. They're perfect. They're super smart. They're perfect warriors. They're this, they're that. Azzarello said, nah, they're not perfect.
Yeah.
And I like that. It humanized them. They weren't, guess what? They were warrior women, and they acted like warrior women, and it really brought some personality to the mythology in a way that Wonder Woman, I thought, really needed it. Plus, as a shout out to my friend Andrea Dree Crazy on Twitter, she loves Superman and Batman. Wonder Woman did have a fling with Superman, although her affair with Superman was never shown in the actual series proper. But.
No, I mean, it's a great recommendation, and it's I think the fact that it is so controversial is something that speaks to how impactful that story was, and I think in a good way, because it forces people to kind of recontextualize aspects of this character's mythology, and you said it best, my friend, so I can't disagree with you there. But we are finally closing in on 2 hours. I do want to thank, obviously, you, Comic Boom, for sitting here and talking comics for 2 hours while we quarantine ourselves and try not to die. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the live chat, not only just in the conversation, but providing their recommended reading, because I think that, a lot of you guys gave me some great recommended reading, just as much as Boom and I might have been. So a big thank you to Nerdy Blurb TV, Joe's Geek Show, Sumoki Dude, JT Gamer, Taylor Pector, Brevin Campbell. I think I got all the people that were really, really big in the chat here. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're watching this in the replay, if you're still with us live in the chat, if you could please share this video with a friend if you enjoyed it. Maybe they're looking for some great comic book reading recommendations to get into. And if you haven't already, please make sure to like the video down below. If we get enough good response, we'll do a part 2 to Comics in Quarantine, depending on how long all of these shenanigans last. So please make sure to drop us a like down below and follow both of us on Twitter. It's running right there on the ticker. You can find me at DarkKnightNat25 and my pal Comic Boom at Metropolis40. Keep up with our antics there. Keep up with everything Dark Knight Nation and Comic Boom there. And again, tell your friends about Comic Boom's channel. Link in the description. This guy is on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So you're not making good moves if you're not watching his channel, because I don't know. I don't know where your head's at. But Comic Boom, any final words? Any videos coming out that you want to let the folks at home know about?
I'm. You know what? I'm going to be reviewing a comic book called Soul Finder: Demon's Match, written by Douglas Ernst. It's an independent title. It was on Indiegogo, or I think he's independently produced. But I quite enjoyed it, so I'll be reviewing that. And I do have I'll be doing a live stream with someone on Crime Comics that'll be coming out probably in the foreseeable future. I'm not sure when. And my usual DC reviews. And yeah. And probably, I'm sure I'm going to be doing more live streams with you, Dark Knight. And I encourage everyone to check out Dark Knight's reviews, especially when this guy reviews a comic book and no one dissects it structurally and artistically as well as you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So again, thank you, ComicBoom, for sitting down and chatting comics and wasting away 2 hours with me. Thank you to everybody watching live, and for those of you watching on the replay, thanks for stopping by. This has been another collaboration with DarkKnightNation and ComicBoom. So thank you guys for watching, and stay safe out there. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.